These lectures are not designed for use as medical references to diagnose, treat, or prevent medical or mental health illnesses or trauma. If you have questions about the diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of a medical condition or mental illness, you should consult your personal physician or other mental health professional.
New Year's is approaching, and you take some time to reflect on the year you just finished and the year ahead. You're a few pounds heavier, you still aren't exercising, and you know you should probably eat more fruits and vegetables. So you decide to make a few New Year's resolutions. 25% of us give up in the first week, nearly 100% in a month. Sound familiar? We're really at a very interesting time in terms of our national psyche regarding willpower and behavior. We have this notion of independence and self-determination. We're heavily invested in rational or even utilitarian analyses of behaviors. What are the pros and cons? It's only logical to stop smoking. But we found that despite boundless amounts of self-criticism, shaming, scaring, grossing out, cajoling, or bribing, our conscious minds still have a very difficult time controlling our unconscious impulses. But even with that said, let's not forget that a large majority of once smokers are now non-smokers. Smoking rates have dropped dramatically in the past 50 years. Obesity is rising, but people are more aware now than ever about nutrition and exercise. A groundswell is building that might just help us turn back this tide. Our population's aging, which means that we're living longer. It also means we have more time to develop a chronic disease, often one that's related to our behavior. It's estimated that the number of people living with a chronic disease in the US is around 157 million. 50% of these people will have multiple chronic conditions, and about 7 out of every 10 deaths, that's 70%, will be the result of a chronic condition. Some of the most chronic diseases we see are heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, stroke, pulmonary diseases, or depression, at a cost of more than $1 trillion a year in the US alone. The high prevalence and the death rates from chronic disease are a relatively new phenomenon and are, in a strange way, the result of the success of modern medicine. 100 years ago, we were dying from acute infectious illnesses like pneumonia, influenza, and tuberculosis. Now we live much longer and we have more opportunity to develop a slower chronic disease like heart disease or diabetes, both of which have strong ties to our health-related behaviors like diet, exercise, and smoking. This matters because if we're thinking about preventing or at least managing a chronic disease, then we need to know how we got here and whether or not our CBT tools can help. But in today's lecture, I'd like to go a little bit beyond how CBT can enhance motivation or promote a healthier lifestyle. I'd like to dig into what it means to have a chronic disease, how it affects our self-image, our sense of hope, our social position, and even challenges our notions about mortality and vulnerability. These are all beliefs. They're all cognitions that can be better understood by examining them with the tools that we already have in our CBT toolbox. And potentially, these are beliefs that can be challenged or savored, again using our CBT tools. Remember that our goal is not to eliminate dysphoria. Sometimes learning you have a chronic disease and having to face mortality is an important wake-up call. But it's essential that we're able to use that dysphoria constructively to learn, grow, and get healthier. We will watch a few clips of Miriam, who we know is struggling with different chronic illnesses. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, high blood pressure, anxiety, and chronic pain from arthritis. But I'll also ask you to step up and imagine your tasks with helping Miriam with some of her CBT skills. Remember that even if you don't have a chronic disease, odds are that you will someday, so why not delay the onset as long as possible? So what are some of the impacts of chronic illnesses? And we're going to think about these impacts in 3 different categories: the psychological impacts of chronic illness, the obvious physical impacts of chronic illness, the symptoms that go with them, and the behavioral impacts, including effects on our social relationships and our activities, both the things we have to do and the things we want to do. So first, the psychological impacts. Now, of course, we see commonly things like stress, depression, or anxiety. We might see changes in our self-image and our level of self-esteem. We all have a mental image of ourselves. I, for instance, despite my age, still in my head see myself as a vibrant 25-year-old. I'm not there, and I think a chronic disease might just wake me up and fast forward to the age that I actually am. We might see that our core beliefs are being challenged. We might have to accept our mortality. We might have certain conditional assumptions that are activated. We all have beliefs about what it means to be sick or what it means to be a sick person. We all have beliefs and rules about how others might treat sick people, be it good or not so good. And of course, the existential challenges of realizing that we have to face our mortality. Now, some of the physical challenges will really depend on the kind of disease that we're talking about, and it will also depend on the severity of that disease. So we know common things are lower energy, you experience more fatigue, you have less endurance than you had before. You might experience chronic pain and discomfort, say from arthritis. You might have more trouble sleeping. You might have more gastrointestinal distress or sensitivities. You might have symptoms like dizziness, sweating, or poor circulation. Some of the behavioral changes that we might see are changes in social and occupational functioning. You're just not able to do as much as you used to do. It's harder for you to rise to the occasion in a social encounter. It's harder for you to burn the midnight oil when you're up against a deadline at work. You might find that you engage in fewer activities. It's harder and harder to activate yourself. It takes a lot more energy to overcome that inertia, get out of the house. You might also see that your social roles are changing. Maybe your kids are adults now and they see you in a different way. Maybe your kids see you as more vulnerable and needing more support. The power dynamics change. You might still be the matriarch or the patriarch, but maybe now your kids are stepping up as adults too. There are also deeper and maybe more subtle changes that can greatly contribute to stress and challenge even the best coping skills. There is a financial strain, and let's face it, healthcare and medications in this country are very expensive. But there's also the looming loss of independence, the loss of your autonomy. Most of us dread the idea of becoming a burden on others and needing to be taken care of. It's easy to fall into catastrophic thinking and to imagine yourself as an invalid when you're first diagnosed with a chronic disease. And even if you don't slide too far down that slippery slope, you might notice that your food just doesn't taste as good as it used to. You don't enjoy reading as much. It's too hard to concentrate. You get more easily irritated or discouraged. It's almost like you feel everything that used to give you joy is now slipping through your fingers, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Or at least it seems that way. I hope you're thinking about habits of mind as I described what might happen with a chronic disease. There's selective attention. There's magnification and minimization. There's fortune telling, predicting the future. There's all or none thinking. Really, most of the thinking shortcuts are in play. The good news about that is we have the tools to help us come up with more balanced cognitions. Again, we don't want to be Pollyanna and we don't want to use denial, but coming up with thoughts that are more helpful might help us cope more effectively. Then we might want to break out our PST skills, our problem-solving therapy skills, and see what we can do to address the very real problems that chronic diseases can create. Let's first look at these tools in the service of emotion regulation. Then we'll look at using these same tools to address some of the social, occupational, and physical challenges that might come up. Let's begin with a short clip from Miriam, who's describing her chronic illnesses, some of the troubles that arise, and the beginning of narrowing things down to set some goals for her chronic disease management. So Miriam, you mentioned that you have a number of chronic diseases that you'd like to get a better handle on.
Yes, I have COPD, which I've told you. My lungs, even as a child, weren't really strong.
Okay.
And then both my parents smoked. So, you know, and back then, everybody smoked in the house and in cars and everything.
Right.
And I also have high blood pressure, and I have arthritis.
Okay, so three different things, and I know that one maybe affects the other, but three distinct diagnoses. And how would you say you're managing those right now? Great job, room for improvement, not doing much? What do you think?
I don't like taking medication.
Okay.
So even though it's prescribed for me, I don't manage it very well. I take my COPD only if I'm having distress, which is, my doctor said, you have to take it all the time. And high blood pressure medicine, I don't like taking pills, so I try to manage that without, but it doesn't work very well.
Okay.
So, and the arthritis is just, taking pain pills for that now and then. So I'm not managing it very well.
Okay. All right. Well, let's set some goals and talk about what we can do. And I know you talk about all of these with your primary care provider and the person prescribing the pills for you. But I think you're right. If it's just about pills, then it's probably not enough.
Right.
That we want to minimize medication usage, although some medications may be essential and important. So things like exercise, like diet, or other interventions might be helpful as part of a package to help you to cope with your chronic diseases.
Right.
Now, if you think of those three, the COPD, the high blood pressure, and your arthritis, which of those would you like to talk about first?
I think maybe the high blood pressure and arthritis.
Okay.
I think I could manage the high blood pressure better if I didn't have the arthritis, maybe.
Got it.
But I have the combination.
Got it. So, and we know the non-medication treatment for high blood pressure is physical activity and diet. So it's the kinds of foods you eat, but also reducing sodium intake. So do you think you're on the right diet, or is it more about exercise, or what do you think?
Well, I don't like food without salt, so
Okay.
I think maybe the exercise. I don't think I'm on the right track.
Okay. So room for improvement, right? But
Right.
that's why we're working on it.
Right.
Okay. So let's start with talking about your high blood pressure. And the good thing about high blood pressure is it's easy to take and to get a reading, so you know where your blood pressure is, if it's going up, if it's going down. And just remembering that our blood pressure is supposed to go up and down depending on how active we are and what we're doing and if we're stressed out. But if the average is higher than it's supposed to be, then we know it can be a problem. You're in the mild hypertension category right now, which means you might be able to manage this with exercise and with diet. And that means no medications if you can get the average down.
Yeah, that would be great.
Let's address some of her cognitions first. She says she's not managing her illnesses well, and she seemed a little disappointed in herself. At the same time, she shared a thought I hear often about taking medications. She doesn't like taking so many pills. In fact, nearly 40% of adults over the age of 65 take 5 or more prescription medications daily. And that doesn't include vitamins, supplements, or any over-the-counter drugs. Her first cognition, she's not doing a good job, is an opinion, a self-criticism that may or may not be based on data. So first, we would want data that we can collect through self-monitoring. I would start with the disease she's most concerned about, and with her input, help her design a self-monitoring form. She might track her daily blood pressure, her average pain ratings, or her level of discomfort with breathing. Once we have data, we'll want to revisit the accuracy of her self-evaluation. If it's accurate, we want to break out our problem-solving therapy skills. First, building a problem-solving attitude, then clearly articulating the problem and possible solutions. More on this later. There's also the second group of thoughts about medications, or it could be about medical adherence in general. Maybe she doesn't like going to the doctor. Maybe she doesn't follow her recommendations for diet or exercise. Or maybe she slips a bit around required vaccinations and boosters. Let's take a look at a thought record she did about medications. In the left-hand column, the trigger was opening up her medicine cabinet in the morning and seeing all those bottles of pills. Her emotions, the next column, were discouragement, hopelessness, irritation, and resignation. The strongest was feeling discouragement, which she gave an intensity rating of 70. The hot thought related to feeling discouraged was, oh my word, look at all those pills. I feel bad if I take them. I feel bad if I don't take them. I must really, really be a mess. Nothing I do will matter. Now, you can probably see that this cognition overlapped with hopelessness, and it also stirred up some of her worry and some of her anxiety. What we need is some more effective emotion regulation. When I probed for other thoughts about pills, there were quite a few. All doctors want to do is prescribe pills. Maybe they should take more time to listen. The drug companies must be making a fortune off people like me. And I feel like I'm chasing my tail. I take one pill to manage the side effects of another pill, which manages the side effects of another pill. Remember that it's super common to have a whole cluster of thoughts around a trigger, and these thoughts might pull you towards completely different emotions, and might even be helpful and constructive. Your challenge is to figure out where to start, then stay focused until you complete all 7 columns of the thought record. You can always go back and start another thought record for one of the other cognitions. The trick is to start with the hottest cognition, the one that stings the most, has the highest emotional intensity related to it, and stay focused on that one until you've rewritten a more balanced thought that lowers that emotional intensity. For Miriam, the hot thought was linked to her discouragement. Oh my word, look at all those pills. I feel bad if I take them. I feel bad if I don't take them. I must really, really be a mess. Nothing I do will matter. Remember the different strategies we've used to get us to a more balanced thought. Looking for evidence for and against. Decentering, or imagining yourself talking to a friend who had the same thought. Identifying the habits of mind, the name it to tame it approach, and using some linguistic strategies like yes, but, or softening absolute words like always or never. Think about what you would do first. What would you say to Miriam to help her get to that balanced thought? We broke the thought down into 3 different pieces. The first piece, I feel bad if I take them, I feel bad if I don't take them. The second piece, I must really, really be a mess. The third piece, nothing I do will matter. Let's think about how we might develop more balanced thoughts for each of these, then link back to emotion regulation. First was, I feel bad if I take them, I feel bad if I don't take them. So we'd want to use self-monitoring, and we might look at days when she's taken them and days when she hasn't taken her medications and rate on a 1 to 10 scale of how her different symptoms are feeling or what her global rating of feeling is overall. We might even do a behavioral experiment if it doesn't naturally occur where there are days she does and doesn't take her medications. The second thought was, I must really, really be a mess. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard her call herself a mess. We know that she's highly self-critical and she selectively attends to her flaws or perceived mistakes. What would you do? We might have her gather more evidence. We might have her think about counter-evidence of times when she was really in the zone and did an incredible job. If not with herself, maybe with her son, maybe with her husband, or maybe even with all the medical care that she provided for her mother. The third part of that thought was, nothing I do will matter. This is her hopelessness creeping out. You could try some linguistic strategies and get to something like, some things I've tried haven't really helped, but we're still not quite there. What else would you try? She eventually got to, I'm feeling frustrated right now, but a lot of people live with hypertension and arthritis. There's really no reason why I can't do that too. Now let's circle back to the 2 primary targets of our CBT tools. Emotion regulation, like the thought record we just did for Miriam, and addressing changes in social, occupational, and physical functioning. Let's dig a little deeper into what comes up in the social arena. The next challenge with chronic illness is the impact that it can have on your relationships. It's hard to be a good employee when you need extended time off. It's hard to be a good friend when you cancel plans at the last minute. It's hard to be a good partner or parent when you barely have the energy to get out of bed. No matter how supportive people are or how often you explain, it feels terrible. You feel like you're violating your own rules about what it means to be a friend, a mom, a spouse, or an employee. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also your relationship with yourself that changes. You aren't that healthy, vibrant young person anymore. You're no longer going to be that perky, healthy grandma that you always saw in your mind's eye. Life has taken a wrong turn, or at least a detour. What can you do? Well, grieving does come to mind. You can grieve the loss of that image, of that imagined future, and then make necessary adjustments. So we've used our CBT tools to help us with the emotional and social consequences of having a chronic disease. Let's now turn to look at how we might use those same tools in the service of chronic disease management. And here I'm talking about both primary prevention, how to prevent the disease in the first place, and secondary and tertiary prevention, or how to prevent or at least slow the disease's progression once you actually have it. Some of the mechanisms at play might include promoting positive health-related behaviors, and this is the diet, exercise, not smoking, taking medications as prescribed. We might want other strategies to promote medical adherence or improving or strengthening your medical team, reducing your psychosocial stress, improving emotion regulation, which will enhance motivation to change, including building more hope and building more self-confidence. What we've been doing is working on the part of the chronic care model called self-management support, where a patient steps up to manage their own disease. This isn't a free pass for doctors, but remember that even if you see your doctor every month, the vast majority of time it's just you and your family and your diseases. So it really behooves you to develop some strategies to manage things on your own. Let's take a step back and look at the broader chronic care model. Now, the chronic care model was designed to elaborate necessary cooperation between community members, that includes you and your family and healthcare teams. It was meant to stimulate and to promote family and patient involvement in disease self-management and to promote shared decision-making. The emphasis is on both quality and quantity of life. So even though a cure may not be possible, maximizing functionality and minimizing suffering might be possible. Let's take a look as Miriam learns about the chronic care model. So why don't we talk about the model that we're going to place this in? And I'm wondering if you and your physician have ever talked about the chronic care model. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. And I think, where medicine, or at least general medicine, is going these days is they're realizing that most people, especially, when you're over 50, have chronic diseases, a lot of times multiple chronic diseases. They're not curable, but they're manageable. And you can minimize symptoms, minimize medications, and have a high quality of life for decades, even though, you do have hypertension, right? It's not going to go away, or COPD, you're not going to be able to cure that, at least, not that we know of right now. So it's a model to help you feel like you have more power, like you have more of a voice, you have more of a say-so in how your chronic disease gets managed. But it's also a way of thinking about how you can better cooperate with the medical team. Because you're a member of that team, you're a key member of that team, right? So you should feel like you're on top of things as much as everyone else is.
Okay.
So if you look at the chronic care model, so here's sort of the environment in which you exist.
Okay.
And it first helps us to remember that even though you go to the doctor maybe once every month or two, most of the time when you're living with your chronic disease, you're not at the doctor's office, right? You're out at your house, you're in the world, you're sort of doing things. So we see the circle with the community. So we want to think about things that the community can offer to help you manage your disease. So if you wanted to walk, for instance, is there a place for you to walk in your neighborhood? Is there a fitness program, at the senior center or with friends or with neighbors? So that's all part of your chronic disease management package. Okay. The smaller circle here is the healthcare system, so your team. And I know that you've met in the past, it's been a while, but with a nutritionist before. Mm-hmm. You might have met with a physical therapist before. Your physician, nurses, they're all, and I'm part of that sort of healthcare system. But you're a central part of that too, and here they call it self-management or self-management support. So our job isn't just to prescribe things, it's to help you take better care of yourself. So we want you to feel like you have support to do that. And where we're trying to get is that we have an informed, active patient, that's you, and we have a prepared, proactive practice team, and they're there as your consultants, as your experts, to help you weigh your options, to make some decisions, and to track your own progress. And you've wanted to start with high blood pressure, so why don't we start there? And you specifically mentioned walking. So why don't we think about ways to help support you in thinking about some strategies to walk a little more? Now, have you had the goal of walking more in the past?
I have. It was earlier in my diagnosis, to walk, and it would be better. So I have had that, but I'm not motivated sometimes to do it, and like I said, there was no one to do it with, and so they have suggested it, but I hadn't done it.
Yeah. So in walking is an example of physical activity. It really could be any sort of activity, and I think a couple of key criteria is it has to fit into the structure of your life. So you don't want to have to completely rearrange your world in order to be physically active. So if there's a close place to walk, there's someone to walk with that fits in your day, then that's great. If it's not particularly fun or interesting or engaging, but you do enjoy dancing, for instance, taking a ballroom dancing class or something would be a good way to be more physically active. So I think enjoyment and ease of use will be two things to think about. And sounds like you want a partner, right? A friend or someone
to talk to.
Yeah, somebody to talk to. Okay. So I think what we should do in terms of self-management here is to think of a type of physical activity, maybe walking, maybe something else, a time, a place, and we'll actually write out a schedule. And we know that a lot of times, you're right, these things, they start off with a lot of energy and enthusiasm, kind of like people's New Year's resolutions, and for a week or two they're more active and it kind of drops off. So we want to anticipate that normal, predictable process. And as things start to drop a little bit, of how we can reinfuse energy and excitement and engagement. So that means you'll need to track it over time, how it is when you start, if it starts to go up, if it starts to go down, what new obstacles might emerge, but also what strengths or what facilitators might emerge. There might be new opportunities that you hear about, ways to be more active that you might really enjoy. Okay. And all along, what we'd like to do then is to ultimately measure the effect that this has on your blood pressure. So we'll want to make sure before you leave today, we'll have you stop at the nurse's station and you can have them take your blood pressure. We also have years worth of blood pressures in your medical record. And we'll, every few weeks or so, when you come in to see your doctors for maybe different things, I'll check your blood pressure and we'll see if it's getting better, going in the right direction. Okay. So we'll write this up. We'll have you put it in your therapy journal and have you monitor your progress, and we'll check in next time and see how you did.
Okay.
So Miriam has a good start on narrowing things down and thinking about realistic solutions. She's engaged in what the chronic care model would call self-management support. But what is self-management support? By definition, a chronic disease can't be cured, but its symptoms can be managed and its progression can be halted or at least slowed. Miriam is using thought records to manage her emotions, and she's using activity scheduling and problem-solving therapy to change her health-related behaviors, namely walking more despite the pain that she has in her knees. It's an ongoing, iterative process, so she knows there's no quick fix. I can think of 4 categories of tasks that patients will need to perform. First is managing the illness itself, and that includes things like keeping doctor's appointments and taking medications or going to physical therapy. 2 would be carrying on normal roles and activities. Yes, things have changed, but that doesn't mean that you have to give up all those sources of enjoyment or pleasure or meaning. 3 is to manage the emotional impact of the illness, and here is our emotion regulation. And the 4th is to promote health and prevent additional illness. It's easy to develop tunnel vision once you have a chronic disease and forget that you're trying to prevent all of the other diseases from occurring as well. For managing the illness, like taking medications or making doctor's appointments, there's always data collection and thought records. What are the thoughts that might be keeping you stuck? What thoughts might be driving your avoidance? The behavioral tools can help you maintain normal activities and behaviors. Yes, you may have less energy, but will you feel better if you're inactive? Find a meaningful compromise. Find a plan B if plan A gets derailed due to pain, energy, or other symptoms. Another element of the chronic care model she could address is the need for shared decision-making, where she becomes an active participant in understanding her disease, her treatment options, and in making decisions about what might come next. On average, a physician will interrupt you within the first 10 seconds of a visit. You're rushed, you're shushed, and you're mostly told what to do. You often don't get a chance to ask questions, but it's a two-way street. In a 2018 survey published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, 81.1% of patients have withheld medically relevant information from their doctor. 45.7% avoided telling their doctor they disagreed with them, and 81.8% withheld information because they didn't want to be lectured or judged. This is not a recipe for collaboration or making decisions together. I think both medical providers and patients and families need to take the time to define the problem, set some goals, and go over treatment options together. Research shows that although this may take a little more time up front, it saves time in the long run and promotes better outcomes. Miriam, and really most of this course, has given us ideas on how to regulate emotions, and she is now using her PST tools to promote walking and other healthy behaviors. Just remember that it is about attitude too. You are an expert on yourself. Only you know as much about you, what works, what doesn't, what you prefer. You not only get a vote, you should be the ultimate decision maker who uses the expert input from your medical doctor and medical team. Take out your toolbox and get to work. In our next lecture, we'll dive deeper into a common symptom, chronic pain. We'll learn some of its causes, what it might mean, and most importantly, what we can do about it other than taking opioids. Until next time.